inspires this faith that we share. Rightly understood, love can nurture our spirits and transform the world. May the flame of this chalice honor and embody the power and the blessing of the love we need, the love we give, the love we are challenged always to remember and to share. And now for our covenant.
Love is the doctrine of this church. The quest for truth is its sacrament, and service is its prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge in freedom, to serve humanity in fellowship, thus do we covenant. La doctrina de esta iglesia es el amor. La búsqueda de la verdad es su sacramento y el servicio es su oración. Vivir juntos en paz, buscar el conocimiento en libertad, servir a la humanidad en comunión. Este es nuestro pacto.
Good morning and welcome. Buenos dias. We are happy that you are here in person and online. Emerson Unitarian Universalist Church is named after the Unitarian minister Ralph Waldo Emerson, and we are a diverse religious community that has been a part of the West Valley for over 65 years. I'm Melissa Marote, and my pronouns are she and her, and I'm honored to serve as your worship associate this morning. Just as a reminder, please take a moment to silence your phones, and we also thank you for wearing your mask since this really is still cold and flu season. We welcome all of you here to our service and hope that here at Emerson you'll find a passion to create change and gain comfort through connection during our service today and during our coffee hour, breakout rooms online, and also after the service behind those walls. Unitarian Universalism is a liberal religion that believes in guiding principles which can actually be found in your gray hymnal. They include the inherent worth and dignity of every person, justice, equity, and compassion in human relations, acceptance of one another, and encouragement to spiritual growth in our congregations, a free and responsible search for truth and meaning, the right of conscience and the use of the democratic process within our congregation and society, peace, liberty, and justice for all, and respect for the interdependent web of all existence. This morning, let us remember the land that we stand on is the traditional land of the Tongva, Kizh, Chumash, and Tatavian peoples, past and present. Let us honor the land itself and the people who have stewarded it across generations as we might learn and become better stewards ourselves. Please sign our guest book so that you can get on our email list to get more information about upcoming events and to strengthen our connections here. Also, take a moment to write any joys or concerns in the link in the chat or in the Book of Life near the piano if you want them shared later in the service. And after our service today, please stay again for coffee hour so that we can get to know each other a little bit better. Oh, and it's also the first Sunday potluck. I almost forgot about that. Yes, there's going to be lots of food. So even if you didn't bring anything, you all can partake. And, if you want to help clean up at the end, that would be amazing. So now let's just take a moment to greet our neighbors.
How you doing? Are you? I bet. Yeah. Yeah. That's right. Oh, yeah. Uh-huh. Oh, nice. Nice. That's so great. Oh, that's great. Oh, good for you. That's great. Oh, that's wonderful. Yeah. Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Yeah. Yeah. That's great. That's good. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Those things are amazing. The drum corps stuff, they're so great.
I was watching the Texas
Uh-huh.
their drum corps. They were doing a demonstration.
Yeah.
They had 16
Oh, wow.
These guys are high-step and they play
Yeah.
the
That's
same
cool.
time. Oh, my word. Drop dead.
Hopefully we can keep this conversation going after the service.
This morning, for our story for all ages, we are going to learn about a Unitarian king. How many of you knew there was a Unitarian king? Good number, maybe about a third people or so? All right. Well, long ago, far across the sea in the country of Hungary, lived Queen Isabella. Now, Isabella wanted to be a wise and good queen and to help the people, but the land of Hungary was torn by great wars. The king fought with other kings. The nobles fought with each other. This group of people fought with that group of people, and those people fought with these. They argued about religion and fought over land. Isabella's husband, the king, was away fighting when their baby, John Sigismund, was born. "Come home," she wrote to him. "Come home and see our son." But the king became sick and died when the baby was only 1 week old, and he never saw his son. The nobles elected the baby prince as their new king and cried, "All hail, King John Sigismund of Hungary." But young King John was much too young to rule a country torn by war, indeed to rule any country at all. And other kings from other countries took most of Hungary away from John and kept it for themselves. And Isabella and young John ended up living in a small eastern corner of the kingdom, a place beyond the forests, a grassy plain surrounded by high mountains and watered by quick rushing streams, a land called Transylvania. And there, in the only corner of the kingdom that was left to them, Isabella lived with her son John, and she taught him how to be a good and wise ruler over all the people in the land. But the wars didn't stop while John was growing up. The people were still fighting, sometimes with other countries, sometimes with each other. They still fought over land, and they still argued over religion. Different people followed different religions in Transylvania, and none of them seemed to get along. The Catholics were arguing with the Lutherans. The Lutherans were arguing with the Greek Orthodox, and the Greek Orthodox were arguing with the Calvinists, and the Calvinists were arguing with the Catholics. And it just went on and on and on. Now, in 1557, Queen Isabella issued a new law which said that people could talk about and discuss religion openly, but that they must not fight about religion anymore. Now, 2 years later, Isabella died. John was 19, and now he had to rule by himself. Now, he wanted to be a wise and good king and to help all the people, just as his mother had tried to do. But the people were still arguing about religion. What should we do? Young King John asked one of his advisors, a gray-bearded old noble with a cane. How can we stop the fighting? One king, one country, one religion. Just like France and Spain, we must choose one religion for Transylvania, he said. Everyone will follow it, and then we will have no more fighting. Now, King John didn't think that would work, but something obviously had to be done. And talking was better than arguing. And so King John invited preachers of different religions to come to his court and to talk about religion. And the preachers talked and talked and talked and talked, as preachers are sometimes wont to do. Sometimes they gave up talking to argue with each other. And sometimes they argued so much that King John was afraid they would give up arguing and start fighting, maybe even with swords. But the talks went on day after day, and no one was hurt. One man talked very well, and he convinced people in every discussion that he had, and that man's name was Ferenc Dávid. Nowadays, we would call Ferenc Dávid's religion Unitarianism, because he said that God was one being instead of three. He said God was a unity, not a trinity. Now, King John decided he liked Ferenc Dávid, and he liked the religion too, and he decided to become a Unitarian. One king, one country, one religion, the old nobleman had said. But we need not think alike to love alike, Ferenc Dávid said. And King John agreed. He wanted to be a good and wise ruler over all of the people of the land, and in 1568, he issued the Edict of Torda. That was a special law that said that no one shall be reviled for their religion by anyone. In other words, no one shall be treated poorly because of what they believe. And the edict allowed the people of Transylvania to choose the religion that they thought was best for them. This was the first time anywhere in Europe that this had happened. It was kind of groundbreaking. And so King John Sigismund, the first and only Unitarian king in history, declared that Unitarianism was one of the official religions of Transylvania and that people could worship as they chose. And even today, in that place beyond the forest called Transylvania, which is now part of the country of Romania, there are Unitarian churches, the oldest Unitarian churches in the world, in fact. And Unitarians have lived there for over 400 years, and Unitarians live there still. Unitarianism began with beliefs about the unity of God, but it also came to stand for religious freedom and tolerance, things that are part of our history and heritage to this day. I now invite you to join me in saying our Unitarian Universalist affirmation. You can do the hand signs with me if you like. We are Unitarian Universalists, a people of open minds, loving hearts, and welcoming hands.
As part of our commitment to the values of generosity and equity, We share half our offering with local organizations whose work aligns with our values. This month, we are sharing the plate with the West Valley Food Pantry. Emerson is a founding member of the coalition that formed the West Valley Food Pantry in 1985, and the needs of the community have grown dramatically in the last few years, with the pantry serving around 10,000 people who are food insecure, including people who are homeless, families, and elderly people living on a fixed income, providing them not just with food, but also basic necessities and support services. Donations can be made using the Breeze app or at donate.emersonuuc.org and by selecting Sunday Offering. Please make checks payable to Emerson UU Church and write "Share the Plate" in the memo. If you would like to make a payment on a pledge, please write "Pledge" instead. And thank you so much for your generosity today.
From you I receive, to you I give. Together we share, and from this we live.
Each Sunday, we take time in our service to lift up those joys and sorrows from within our own community and in the wider world. This week in our Book of Life, Lynn Prager writes a joy that Boise State University won their game last Friday, and so her grandson, Samuel Withers, will be marching with the Blue Thunder Band here in Los Angeles in the next 2 weeks. And in our virtual Book of Life, Nicole writes a joy that she just finished reading Braiding Sweetgrass, whose author embodies the intersection of scientific botany and the indigenous gift culture that acknowledges the plant people as part of our non-human family. What an educational and healing book. I look forward to reading it again and again. I don't know, for those of you who were here a couple weeks ago, it was one of the books that I mentioned and quoted from in our Guests on the Land. It's a very rich book. And actually, although I don't think she still identifies as a Unitarian Universalist, she was raised as a Unitarian Universalist, the author of that. Anyway. And going out to our wider world, let us hold in our hearts the people of the Philippines who were hit by a devastating earthquake yesterday. As people who have lived through, as so many of us have lived through, a devastating earthquake, we can imagine the challenges that they are facing. And let our thoughts also go out to the people of Israel and Palestine with gratitude for those hostages who were released, prisoners who were released over the past week, for a pause, albeit too short, in the fighting. And as violence continues, as bombing continues, where at this point no place in Palestine is safe from bombing, our hearts go out with thoughts of peace and hopes for a lasting ceasefire, knowing that violence only begets violence. In a moment, I'm going to sound this singing bowl, and after I do, I invite you to speak aloud into this space or to type into the chat any joys or sorrows, any names or occasions that are on your heart this morning, and that you would like lifted up into this community in this, our embracing meditation. Christina. All that has been shared and all that we hold in the silent sanctuary of our hearts, we offer these into the embrace of this beloved community. I invite you to join me in a spirit of meditation or prayer, to ground yourself in this moment, in this space. Breathing in and out, maybe closing your eyes or softening your gaze. God of all peoples, Spirit of life and love, be in our hearts and minds this hour. Bless this gathering and this place. Help us to speak to one another as we would be spoken to, with truthfulness and kindly regard. Help us to hear one another, to respect our differences as an aid to mutual understanding. Help us to acknowledge our limited vision, that together our grasp of truth is much greater than when alone. May we find here a greater clarity of mind and purpose, strengthened commitment and courage, and a deeper appreciation of our diversity. May we find that renewal of the Spirit which comes when people of good faith, reason, and passion dialogue together. Spirit of life and love, be in our hearts and inform our minds and deeds this hour and in the days to come. Amen. Ashe, and blessed be.
One lazy summer afternoon in Southeast Ohio back in 1981, my 10-year-old self was playing Atari when I heard a knock on the door. My mom was in the kitchen talking on the phone, so I answered the door. On the porch stood two women with impeccable posture carrying Bibles. They asked, "Do you accept Jesus Christ as your personal Lord and Savior?" I hadn't attended church since my parents split when I was 4, and I had never been asked such a question. I really didn't know how to answer it. No? They looked chagrined, but told me that everything would be okay. I could avoid a fiery eternity in hell if I got on my knees and had them help me. I didn't know what to do. So I started descending to my knees on our concrete porch, when all of a sudden my mom burst open the door yelling, "What the hell is going on here? Get off my porch." The women quickly scurried away, and she was angry that I had been led to my knees. She told me to get back inside the house and not to open the door again. But that experience left me truly shaken. I had heard about Jesus, but didn't know he was the Lord. I thought he was the Son. And what was this about a fiery pit of hell? I was scared. But my mom went back to her phone call, and I got back to my game of Frogger and tried not to think about it. One of the many reasons I felt so different from the other kids in Belpre, Ohio, was that not only my parents were divorced, but my father lived in another state, and we never went to church. We didn't belong to a church. Belpre had more churches than schools and was a dry town where you couldn't buy alcohol until just a few years ago. My church experiences were limited to going with a friend after a Saturday night sleepover. Some of these churches encouraged the destruction of rock and roll music and banning books that could lead us astray. I didn't understand a lot of what I was hearing, but mainly was bored out of my mind. And I began to try to sleep over only on Fridays. Over time, I began to associate church with hypocrisy because it seemed like the popular kids at school who professed Christianity were some of the biggest bullies. So it was easy for my teenage self to make the leap that Christians were hypocrites. I began to hate Christians and lumped God and Jesus into them too. Anytime anyone used the word God or Jesus or tried to talk about religion with me, I would seethe with rage. In high school, I was a proud atheist and frequently called a witch and devil worshiper. It didn't help that my mother had a necklace I liked to wear that people said proved I was a devil worshiper because it was a hand doing the devil horns or rock sign. But my mom thought this actually was the sign for love in American Sign Language, which it's not, but she was like, it means love. So anyway. But honestly, some of that was true. I disliked the people in my school so intensely that I looked into Wicca in hopes of being able to cast spells on them. It never worked for me. But I was able to scare them off a little bit with just talking about it a little bit with some of those bullies. So over time, my anger lessened, and when I was in college, I was touched by a TV commercial showing a person handing a stranger an umbrella in a rainstorm. It was the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and they said that they would love to come over and visit and talk. So over college break, I invited Elder Barney and Elder Jim over. They gave me materials and answered many of my questions, and my mom was furious because she said, they're going to brainwash you. But I was genuinely curious and searching for something more, but I just didn't know what. As a women's studies major, however, I was a little put off that women couldn't hold positions of power in their church. I also didn't like how you couldn't drink iced tea, my favorite beverage. Although I did enjoy hearing Elder Barney show off his Mormon rapping skills that he tried to bring in younger members with. While living in Athens, Ohio, I heard about the Crazy Brick Church, which turned out to be the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship built by John Spawforth in the 1970s. And I would say, check it out, Google it. Google the Unitarian Universalist Church in Athens, Ohio. It's really cool. I hadn't experienced anything like it before. There was no minister, and each week there was a lay-led service or a guest speaker. Everyone was very friendly, open-minded, welcoming, and into activism, and no one was telling me what to believe. I started coming every week and invited guests to check it out. I even got my mom to come back to church. Not Unitarian, but she got back to church because of it. As I tended to my religious wounds, I began to understand that when people tried to save me, they were usually coming from a space of love, truly believing that they were offering me eternal salvation. Although I didn't share their beliefs, I didn't need to hate or fear them. I also began to understand that Christians aren't perfect, and neither was Jesus. No one is perfect. We have our good days and our bad days. I try to be a good person every day, but sometimes if I get a bad night's sleep or I'm running late to getting my kids to school, I might call a person who cut me off in traffic a jerk or worse. Hopefully we all have a source or guide of how to be a better human, even if we aren't always successful. So this perspective shift really helped me become a lot more accepting of others. Years later, after I had my kids and moved to Canoga Park, I'd heard about the CDI down the street, a free place to bring kids to explore stuff and make art. And as I was walking down the street, I was surprised to see Emerson UU Church. Oh my gosh, wow. I was so excited. Check this place out. So many people I know have never heard of Unitarian Universalism and make assumptions about me if I ever mention church or being a worship associate. They're like, oh, she's really religious. I kind of want to tell them, it's not what you think. We're different and accepting, and we're inclusive. But it feels weird to try to over-explain myself, but I still try. I honestly believe the world would be a much kinder place if more people accepted our guiding principles. To me, it is like a roadmap to being an understanding and caring human. And it's nice to know that this roadmap never leads anyone down a road to a fiery pit.
There's a joke that Unitarian Universalists don't sing well because they're too busy reading ahead to see if they agree with the lyrics. Our next hymn this morning is about God, or the many ways that humans have sought to define God. A challenging task because how can you ever define a word that tries to give a name to the undefinable? There may be understandings of God here in this hymn that resonate with you and others that don't. Maybe God doesn't resonate with you at all, and you need to translate the concept of God to something else to make it meaningful. And so, as we sing, I invite you to approach the song not by checking ahead to make sure you agree, but with curiosity instead. We're just going to be singing, as you can see, we're singing verses 1, 3, 5, and 6. They're actually 7 different verses because there's so many different ways to think about God. And even more. 1 through 3, 5, and 6. And of course, the words will be on the screen. And before you're thinking like, oh my God, 5 verses, they're all very short. So I invite you to now please rise in body or in spirit and join in singing Down the Ages We Have Trod.
Down the ages we have trod, many paths in search of God, seeking ever to define the eternal and divine. Some have seen eternal good, picture best in parenthood, and being throned above, ruling o'er us in love. There are others who proclaim God and nature are the same, and the present God at home, where creation's laws are known. Where compassion is most found is for some the hallowed ground, and its paths they upward plod, teaching us that love is God.
You can tell who was singing in the hymnals and who was trying to sing along. I invite you to please be seated. That last verse, just for the record, though the truth we can't perceive, this at least we must believe. What we take most earnestly is our living deity. The summer before I started seminary, I had a conversation with my Aunt Carrie, who has a master's of theology and was serving as director of adult faith formation for a Catholic parish near St. Louis, Missouri. It was a rich conversation about theology as we worked to find common ground and understanding amidst differing beliefs. We were discussing the wisdom and teachings shared between the world's religions, how many things tend to show up in different ways across religions. And I was also explaining that Unitarian Universalists believe that there is wisdom to be found in all the world's religions, as well as in secular sources, and that we are encouraged to search for our own individual spiritual truths. Which raised the question, how can people have an individual truth when, by definition, there can only be one universal truth? Surprisingly, it wasn't me, at least surprising to me. It wasn't me, the future Unitarian Universalist minister, who had the explanation. My aunt said, I think there is a universal truth, and I think of it like a giant multifaceted prism or diamond. No person is able to see the whole truth or God. We are only able to see facets of it. Which facets we see are influenced by our perspective, by our life experiences. Not only which holy texts we learned from, but how much money our parents made, what country we were born in, whether we grew up in a safe household, how hard we had to work for success among countless other experiences. So our own individual truths are only a facet or one understanding of that universal truth. Now, I was a little amazed to hear this beautiful concept of oneness and unity amidst diversity from my aunt. To me, it sounded like something that would have come from a Unitarian Universalist. Indeed, there's a famous sermon by Unitarian Universalist minister Forrest Church about seeing the light through many stained glass windows. And so it seemed more likely to come from a Unitarian Universalist, not someone whose job it was to teach other Catholics how to become more devout. Now, I was pleasantly surprised because I thought I would be validating the wisdom and love contained in her spiritual truths. Now, maybe the pain pills she was on for her recent knee surgery made her extra open-hearted. Now, I say that jokingly, but literally when I saw her a couple days later, she did not remember any of the conversation. But she also didn't, held to that belief. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. So, even a couple days later, she, said, yeah, that still sounds right. So, indeed, one of the 6 shared values, with love at the center, arising in the proposed update to the bylaws of our broader Unitarian Universalist Association, is pluralism. We celebrate that we are all sacred beings, diverse in culture, experience, and theology, and that value calls us to learn from one another in our free and responsible search for truth and meaning, to embrace our differences and commonalities with love, curiosity, and respect. As Ferenc Dávid is alleged to have said, we need not think alike to love alike. Now, as far as we can tell, Dávid never actually said this. It was probably a paraphrase of a quote from John Wesley, the founder of Methodism. But the misattribution stuck because it resonated with our understanding of Unitarian Universalism. I think it also speaks to the fact that although this was unique at its time, a couple centuries later, the idea was already spreading beyond Unitarianism. And so for today's service, I tweaked that quote slightly to talk about differing religious beliefs, to distinguish it from next week's service, where I'll talk about differing political opinions. Yet sometimes we Unitarian Universalists fall short of that pluralistic call to embrace our differences with love, curiosity, and respect. At the congregation where I grew up, which, like many Unitarian Universalist churches, had a strong atheistic and humanist streak between roughly the 1960s into the early 2000s, and that varied from congregation to congregation, but it was quite common. And the word of God was excised with hymns and rarely uttered in church. You'd see people kind of, like I said, reading ahead in the hymnal, like, do I agree with this? Despite the fact that plenty of Unitarian Universalists do believe in God. One member of my home congregation described it like coming out of the closet when she told people she was a Christian Unitarian Universalist. One day when I was riding the school bus home from middle school, I was talking to one of my Catholic friends, Joe Miranda, about what we believed as Unitarian Universalists. And, well, rather than tell you about it, I'll try to recreate it for you. What church do you go to? The Unitarian Universalist Church. Is that a Christian church? No, we don't believe in any specific religion. Well, so what do they teach you at your church? Well, we learn about all sorts of different religions. So do they teach from the Bible? Do you believe in Jesus Christ? Well, we learn about some of the stories in the Bible because it has some good teachings, and some people believe that Jesus was the Son of God, and others believe that he was a great teacher. But you don't have to believe in the Bible. Some people are Buddhists or pagans, and a lot of people don't believe in any God, but we believe there's wisdom in all religions. That's what I wish I had said. Instead, it went something more like this. So, do they teach from the Bible? Do you believe in Jesus Christ? Well, we learn about some of the stories in the Bible, but we don't believe in them. Unitarian Universalism came out of Christianity, but we don't have much to do with it anymore. We have a lot more in common with Buddhists. We kind of make fun of Christians in our religious education classes. So that was me, product of Unitarian Universalist religious education from age 4. Now, we did learn about different religions year after year, taught from curricula that was designed to show respect for those religions, but informally through comments and jokes and criticisms from RE teachers, from friends, from parents, and other adults at church. I had picked up that, Christian beliefs were foolish and ignorant and intolerant, and thus so were Christians. At least that's what I was getting. And looking back, I now see it as a tendency to be judgmental, the same way we accused Christians of being. Now, part of me understands it, right? With Christianity being the dominant religion in the United States and in the world, those of us who aren't Christians sometimes feel embattled, especially when Christianity is used to support or justify homophobia and transphobia and sexism, as justification to wage wars in Muslim-majority countries and to restrict reproductive rights. And many of the Unitarian Universalists who are most critical of Christianity grew up in a Christian church that was intolerant or judgmental, sexist, or preached hellfire and damnation. Harmed and sometimes even abused by so-called Christians, or unable to square their developing beliefs with the rigid teachings of the church, they left, frequently severing all ties. Now, of course, such experiences are not unique to Christianity either. People can have similar experiences no matter how they grew up. As we grow older, our perspective changes. Some facets of that prism may shine more brilliantly as others fade away. But that doesn't mean that the facets we ignore or no longer see don't still offer insight into the truth or that which is holy to someone else. And at a time when conservative Christians claim to speak for all of Christianity, it's easy to forget those Christian voices who lift up Jesus' radical message of love and hope and compassion, beauty, good works, forgiveness, redemption, and radical inclusion, all things that we and our Unitarian and Universalist Christian forebears esteem. That's what Christianity can look like too, which includes the 20% of Unitarian Universalists who identify as Christian, who find even the most liberal Christian church a little too dogmatic or crave the religious pluralism that we offer. As a Unitarian Universalist wrote in a blog post where he came out as Christian, I do not believe that Jesus died so that I might be saved by a vengeful, sadistic, and petty tyrant of a God from an eternal torment as a result of an act committed by a mythical ancestor 6,000 years ago. But I still declare myself a Christian.
I do believe that the planet and the universe are indeed as old as the best scientific evidence appears to show them to be, and the entire universe's coming into being was an act of creation by a supreme and not entirely knowable, distant and overarching, yet intimate, creative force and personality for which God is the most familiar name, however imperfect or insufficient. I believe that many people have walked this planet and been acutely in touch with that force, that personality. I believe that one of them lived about 2,000 years ago, a working class man born into a humble family in the Middle East, in a country under the grip of a foreign oppressor who grew up to preach a radical message of love, equality, humility, and sharing. A message that called on all to transcend boundaries established by social norms and structures of hierarchy. His message was not in itself unique, but it was rendered in a powerful and distinctive voice. That message speaks deeply to me, and so I call myself a Christian. Now, for me, as someone who considers myself an agnostic, I can say that that facet of truth looks incredibly similar to mine. But until my early 20s, I couldn't see it. I think part of it was that woundedness from growing up not Christian in a Christian society and having people, tell me, well, you're going to go to hell. You push back against it. And some of you have your own experiences of wounds. And I think it's an important part of our spiritual practice as Unitarian Universalists to heal from those wounds so that we can maybe see once again or appreciate those pieces of wisdom that exists in traditions we may have forsaken. Not that you need to accept all of it, because there is stuff that, I think we should rightly leave behind, but to see that there are so many different truths sometimes involves healing our own woundedness. Now, I grew up vacillating between atheism and agnosticism, and I had a hard time connecting with spirituality that differed from mine because I knew I had the capital T truth. And every other belief was wrong and often foolish. But over time, I began to embrace the unknown, admit that I did not have all or even a meaningful fraction of the answers. I caught glimpses of the truth refracted through other facets. I realized that although I had a theology which provided meaning and inspiration in my life, there were innumerable ways which people connect with that same intangible sense of the divine. Whether it's seeing the divine as a benevolent parent, or as embodied love, or simply nature. In King John Sigismund and Ferenc Dávid's day, it was revolutionary to enshrine freedom of belief and religious intolerance or religious tolerance in law. There was nothing else like it anywhere in Europe. But that Unitarian Transylvanian model gradually spread across Europe, as I mentioned with John Wesley, as one of many cases, and eventually found its way over here in order to become one of the founding principles of the United States. But these days, religious freedom and tolerance are not quite so revolutionary, although they do face some threat right now in this time when Islamophobia and anti-Semitism are on the rise, and emboldened Christian nationalists want to remake America as a Christian nation, oftentimes with the threat of violence. And we must stand against that. But thankfully, we are not on our own, as countless people of all faiths and of no faith share that same desire to protect that religious freedom and tolerance. But as Unitarian Universalists, we are called to take it further than freedom and tolerance and embrace our differences and commonalities with love, curiosity, and respect. To realize that there is so much wisdom out there contained in all of these different traditions, so much wisdom contained in the beliefs of those we sit next to on Sunday. All too often, religion is used to divide us. And as Unitarian Universalists, I believe we are called to be leaders in this work of creating a dialogue, finding common ground between differing faiths. As a religion, I believe we are uniquely situated to this work. UUs often find ourselves working in interfaith coalitions, like our own. I didn't write down the name, and it's just Interfaith Solidarity Network. Thank you. Like our own Interfaith Solidarity Network here in the San Fernando Valley, to work on issues like immigration reform, economic justice, homelessness, and affordable housing, to join together in movements for peace, and with many, if not all, of our siblings of faith to stand up for LGBTQ rights and for reproductive justice as well. That work is incredibly vital, and I think it is powerful coming from us in particular as people of faith. But in order to better do that work outside our walls, we have some work to do here in ourselves. But the work is not just for someone else's benefit. It's for all of us. All of us must be able to bring our whole self to this space and to share deeply and learn from each other's wisdom and experiences. It is through those connections across difference, recognizing that our plurality, that is one of the ways we build the beloved community. May it be so. Our choir will now sing we don't have a closing hymn this morning, but there is an opportunity for you all to sing on the chorus to the song. And this is, as we've been talking about Unitarian Universalist history this morning, this is a song about that religious tradition of passing on the light across the ages as we continue to pass it forward.
And I will let you all know when you can join us. Thanks.
bring it on.
Well, as our service comes to a close, let us reach out and take hands or bump elbows, put a hand on a shoulder, make a connection. For those of you joining us online, we invite you to send your energy out to us as we send ours out to you and to each other. We close with the words of Robert Mabry Dobbs. For all those who see God, may God go with you. All who embrace life, may life return your affection. For all who seek a right path, may a way be found, and the courage to take it step by step.
Yes.
Amen. Shea.